The South Korean government has designated all 21 remaining districts in Seoul as speculative zones and laid out tighter lending rules in its latest efforts to curb heated housing prices in the capital region. A government response team is set to depart for Cambodia this afternoon to engage with officials there to address the string of crimes targeting South Koreans in the country and to bring back Korean nationals who may be associated with the incidents. South Korea's economic chiefs are heading to the U.S. in force for trade talks with the U.S. and what could include details for finalizing Seoul's $350 billion investment in Washington. We begin with the third set of housing market stabilization measures under the Lee Jae-myung administration. Wednesday's regulations are set to put all Seoul districts in speculative zones as of tomorrow, Thursday, along with stricter mortgage loans. Our Park Jun-an explains.
After introducing loan restrictions in June and a housing supply plan in September, the South Korean government on Wednesday announced the third phase of its housing stabilization measures. Starting Thursday, all 25 Seoul districts and 12 regions in Gyeonggi-do province where investment is actively concentrated will be considered zones subject to regulations. The plan has been introduced to prioritize residential stability by balancing both demand and supply.
To ensure housing stability, the government will manage the real estate market in a balanced manner, considering both supply and demand, while imposing actual residency requirements for home purchases and strengthening regulations on loans and taxation.
Those include new loan-to-value ratio rules for the 37 affected regions, which will be lowered from the current 70% to 40%, meaning homebuyers must provide at least 60% of the purchase price in cash. Also, a new mortgage limit will be implemented when borrowing money. The money a buyer could borrow can range anywhere between 200 million won to 600 million won. If someone wants to buy a house that is worth 1.5 billion won, the maximum amount of money they could leverage is 600 million won. However, the mortgage limit will be capped at 400 million Korean won for homes valued at over 1.5 billion and up to 2.5 billion. Lastly, the cap will be fixed at 200 million won for those above 2.5 billion. Under the new regulation, as the value of a purchased house increases, the maximum loan amount permitted decreases, effectively lowering the loan-to-value ratio. The government plans to carefully review real estate tax reforms while stepping up measures to curb illegal transactions and speculative demand, aiming to restore order in the housing market. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
A joint response team organized by the South Korean government is set to depart to Cambodia in the coming hours to deal with the crimes involving Korean nationals there and to bring back detained Koreans home. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
The South Korean government is to dispatch a joint response team to Cambodia on Wednesday amid rising cases of kidnapping, detention, and employment scams of Korean nationals in recent months. The team led by the Second Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Kim Jin-ah involves relevant ministries, including the National Police Agency, Justice Ministry, and National Intelligence Service. The emergency task force is to work closely with the Cambodian authorities for the investigation and autopsy of a university student who was allegedly lured there by a scam ring and tortured to death in the country.
A joint Korea-Cambodia task force on scam crimes has been launched. We intend to run this actively and discuss the establishment of a Korea desk within the Cambodia police force. We aim to take firm action against those who commit crimes and swiftly rescue any victims.
The task force will also be discussing the swift repatriation of detained Korean nationals, including those who are currently in Cambodia on criminal charges for scam crimes. Some have reportedly been refusing to return to Korea, as upon their return, they will be investigated for alleged involvement and if found guilty, would face the appropriate legal consequences. Certain areas in Cambodia, including its capital Phnom Penh, are under a special travel alert, while the government is also considering designating these key areas as no-travel zones to further prevent these incidents. As the South Korean ambassador to Cambodia role is still vacant, the former ambassador to Lebanon will be dispatched to look over the local situation. Victims of scam crimes are typically lured with promises of high-paying jobs. There are said to be still around 80 Koreans missing in Cambodia. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Prime Minister Kim Min-seok has urged stronger efforts to ensure the safety of inbound tourists, as South Korea expects an influx of visitors ahead of the APEC leaders meeting later this month. Presiding over a meeting with relevant ministries on Wednesday, Kim denounced the ongoing anti-foreigner protests in the country as acts of self-harm and ordered a firm response in accordance with the law and principles. Among the measures discussed was strengthening information sharing through the 1330 Korea Travel Hotline, a 24-hour helpline that offers multilingual guidance on immigration, safety, and tourist complaints. After striking a bilateral framework trade deal in late July, South Korea and the U.S. are now left with detailing the plans for South Korea's $350 billion investment in the U.S., from how to finance the deal to sharing the profits. To make tangible progress ahead of the APEC leaders meeting, high-level officials are heading to the U.S. for negotiations. Our Moon Ji-young reports.
Amid a deadlock in South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations over the detailed implementation of a comprehensive $350 billion investment package, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol departed for Washington on Wednesday to attend the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meetings, and also for coordinated separate meetings with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Although the schedule will be extremely tight, I anticipate multiple opportunities to meet with the U.S. Treasury Secretary. As I previously explained, I anticipate that Secretary Bessent is already quite familiar with Korea's situation, and I'll make sure to convey it thoroughly before my return.
Reinforcing the high-level delegation, Presidential Chief of Policy Kim Yong-bum and Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan will also depart for Washington on Thursday for follow-up tariff negotiations. Presidential Chief of Policy Kim is specifically scheduled to meet with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The presidential office explained that the delegation's visit aims to achieve substantial progress, emphasizing the timely opportunity presented by the upcoming presidential summit alongside the APEC leaders meeting. Their talks are expected to focus on the details of South Korea's $350 billion investment package. This visit comes as Seoul and Washington have reported little progress since striking a bilateral framework trade deal in late July, which aimed to lower U.S. tariff on South Korean goods. Crucial differences remain over how to finance Korea's planned investment in the U.S. and share the profits. Seoul seeks to largely fund its planned investment with loans and credit guarantees, but as the U.S. demands a direct cash investment, Seoul is pushing for a currency swap deal to mitigate potential financial crisis risks. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Now, over in the U.S., President Donald Trump said his administration is considering cutting cooking oil-related trade ties with China. Now, the announcement is part of Washington's retaliation for Beijing's refusal to buy American soybeans. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Tensions between the United States and China are flaring up again, this time over soybeans and cooking oil. U.S. President Donald Trump announced Tuesday that his administration is considering cutting cooking oil-related business ties with China as part of potential retaliation for Beijing's refusal to buy American soybeans. He described China's move as an economically hostile act and indicated that the U.S. could easily produce cooking oil domestically, making imports unnecessary. China has long been the biggest buyer of U.S. soybeans, purchasing around 27 million metric tons worth nearly $12.8 billion in 2024. But since May, Beijing has not bought a single soybean from the United States, marking a sharp break that comes amid a broader trade standoff. Later at the White House, Trump addressed the U.S.-China relationship more broadly. He said Washington must be cautious in its dealings with Beijing, noting that while the relationship with Chinese leadership remains stable overall, China has a tendency to push boundaries, and the U.S. will not allow itself to be taken advantage of. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said the timing of the additional 100% tariffs on Chinese exports, set to take effect by November 1st or earlier, will ultimately depend on Beijing's actions. He explained that officials from both sides met for staff-level talks in Washington this week, and that there's still a possibility of working through disagreements, particularly over China's restrictions on critical minerals. Greer emphasized that the U.S. will not accept a system where China tries to control global high-tech supply chains. With soybeans, cooking oil, and critical minerals all on the table, both Washington and Beijing are under pressure to find a way to ease tensions before the next round of tariffs hits next month. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And amid rising trade tensions, China has announced sanctions targeting 5 U.S. subsidiaries of South Korean shipbuilder Hanwha Ocean, accusing them of cooperating with American efforts to impose punitive measures on Chinese vessels. The move bans Chinese organizations and individuals from conducting business with these subsidiaries and comes amid rising tensions in the global shipping and shipbuilding, including new port fees imposed by both the U.S. and China. In response, South Korea's presidential office said on Tuesday that it is communicating and responding through Korea-China trade channels, and that the immediate impact appears limited, while the effect on U.S.-Korea shipbuilding cooperation will be assessed comprehensively. With the APEC leaders meeting in South Korea's Gyeongju being just about 2 weeks away from today, eyes are on whether the event will include scenes that we saw in 2019, when the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. met up in the Korea's demilitarized zone. Our Kim Bo-kyung talked to some experts.
Speculation over the possibility of a North Korea-U.S. summit mounts, as many sources say American diplomats are readying themselves for the event. The Telegraph reports that not only are American diplomats dusting off plans for Trump to make a surprise visit to the DMZ, but the U.S. Embassy based in Seoul, too, is revisiting such a plan. Unification Minister Chung Dong-young, too, during the parliamentary audit on Tuesday, mentioned a summit could be possible and that the leaders appear ready for talks based on collected data. Trump already has experience of having become the first sitting American president to set foot in the reclusive regime by crossing the demarcation line in 2019. The meeting was at the border village of Panmunjom inside the DMZ, where another surprise visit could happen as they have already seen each other there. Experts say the possibility of a meeting cannot be ruled out, but it depends on Trump.
Looking back at what happened in 2019, the two leaders know each other well. And given that Kim is emphasizing his personal ties with Trump, the possibility of a summit cannot be ruled out.
Ultimately, it comes down to whether President Trump will make a decision regarding Kim Jong-un's key demand, recognition of North Korea as a nuclear-armed state.
When it comes to when Kim will decide to test fire the recently unveiled Hwasong-20 ICBM, the same expert says North Korea is ready to launch anytime, but will choose the proper time to boost its bargaining power. Yet the launch won't be before their potential meeting at the end of this month, as Trump would find it unpleasant and could reject the negotiations. Apart from a potential summit, South Korea is making efforts to ease tensions and normalize inter-Korean relations, with the Unification Ministry planning to restore structure and functions that were scaled back under the previous administration. Yet the expert says normalizing ties would take some time.
Given that resolving North Korea's nuclear issue through U.S.-North Korea dialogue is likely to take a considerable amount of time, it's reasonable to expect that it will also take a long time before any real momentum builds in U.S.-North Korea talks or inter-Korean relations.
With North Korea reportedly having built sections of anti-tank barriers spanning 10 kilometers along the inter-Korean border, Pyongyang seemingly has no interest yet in normalizing ties with the South unless the negotiations with the U.S. end successfully. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has signaled a policy shift to promote the country's gaming industry as part of efforts to elevate South Korea as a global cultural powerhouse.
수출을 먹고 사는 나라는 이런 게임 수출이 진짜 진정한 수출인 것 같아요. 어떻게 이 문화산업 중에서도 게임 산업을 진흥할 건지, 또 이거를 특정 소수가 독점하는 게 아니라 많은 사람들이 기회와 이익을 함께 나누는 그런 좋은 산업으로 만들 것인지.
He met with CEOs from the gaming industry today in Seoul, hinting at a shift away from the past era of regulations that focused on preventing addiction, as it noted the economic potential. The president's office has designated this week as K-Culture Week. South Korea's benchmark KOSPI has once again renewed its all-time intraday high, while also setting a new closing record. The KOSPI closed Wednesday's session at 3,657.28, up 95.47 points or 2.68% from the previous trading day. And this marks a new record for the index's closing price. At one point, the KOSPI hit an intraday high of 3,659.91. The rally was led by surges among top market cap stocks, especially the main chip makers. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix successfully rebounded, climbing 3.71% and 2.67% respectively. Now, Samsung Electronics finished the session at 95,000 won, setting a new record for its closing price. The International Monetary Fund has upped South Korea's growth outlook for the year at 0.9%. But the international body's warnings linger that escalating tariff tensions and global uncertainties could slow the recovery. Moon Hae-ryun has more.
The International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast for South Korea's economic growth amid pressure on Seoul to wrap up trade negotiations in Washington. In its latest economic outlook, the IMF now expects the economy to grow by 0.9% in 2025, 0.1 percentage points higher than its July projection. This is in line with forecasts from domestic institutions such as the Bank of Korea, but lower than that of the OECD's. South Korea's forecast for 2026 was maintained at 1.8%, with the country's finance ministry stating that this projection is interpreted to mean that economic growth will return to its normal trajectory next year. The IMF, however, warns that escalating tariff conflicts could hurt South Korea's export-driven sectors, particularly automobiles, and weigh on overall growth if trade tensions intensify again. Globally, the IMF raised its growth outlook to 3.2% for this year, up 0.2 percentage points from July, citing stronger than expected resilience in major economies. The U.S. economy is now projected to grow by 2% this year and 2.1% next year, while China's growth is expected to slow from 4.8% to 4.2%. The financial institution said the impact of U.S. tariff policies was smaller than initially feared, thanks to preemptive supply chain adjustments and new trade arrangements. But it cautioned that rising tensions between Washington and Beijing could once again weigh heavily on global growth.
This is more of a downside risk in a sense. This is what we have to think about what could happen if negative trade measures were implemented, if some restrictions on exports of critical materials were implemented. It illustrates the potential for the global economy to take a turn for the worse if trade tensions become more elevated.
It also pointed to the ongoing AI investment boom as a potential source of instability, warning that if the bubble bursts, it could echo the shock of the internet stock bubble bust of the early 2000s. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
A year after Kang's historic Nobel Prize in Literature, the world's curiosity for Korean stories has only grown. But beyond the words on the page, it's the art of translation that has carried those stories across borders. Our Park Hyo-bin tells us more.
It's been a year since Korean author Kang became the first South Korean to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Since then, with K-pop, K-dramas, and K-films capturing audiences worldwide, Korean literature has emerged as another key pillar of the K-culture wave, and at the heart of it all is translation.
Translation is absolutely vital. Korean is not a global common language, so for our literature to reach international readers, translation is the most important bridge.
Kwak says the bridge is now being built by a new generation, native language translators from around the world drawn by their passion for Korean culture.
Since 2008, our institute has been running a translation academy to train translators who can faithfully and fluently convey Korean literature. Each year, about 120 students from 7 language regions take part in the program. Many of them are so fluent in Korean that you can hardly tell whether they are native speakers or not.
So do you have any specific plans or any goals in terms of making the Korean literature more popular in the global market?
We want to strengthen the translators' entire career path from newcomers learning under senior mentors to professionals joining dedicated residencies that allow them to focus fully on translation.
As Korean books gain traction abroad, Kwak notes that global readers are embracing an ever wider range of stories, from healing-themed fiction to socially charged novels.
Our next goal is to broaden that reach, not only sharing popular titles, but also introducing literary works of high quality and artistic depth that haven't yet been discovered overseas.
For Kang and other writers, translation has been the key to voice, and as more translators bridge languages and cultures, the world of Korean literature continues to expand beyond borders. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
Rain clouds will gradually approach from the west and it will rain in most areas tonight. In particular, between dawn and morning tomorrow, Chungcheong-do and southern areas will have heavy rain of around 20 millimeters per hour. Currently, heavy rain warnings and advisories have also taken effect in some areas of Jeju Island. This rain will mostly subside tomorrow morning. Today's daytime temperature rose to 23 degrees Celsius in Seoul, slightly higher than yesterday. It will be very similar to today during the day tomorrow in most parts of the country. The morning will start cool tomorrow at 17 degrees in Seoul and Daegu, 15 degrees in Chuncheon. Daily highs will move up to 23 degrees in Seoul and Daejeon, 24 degrees in Busan. After the rain across the country on Saturday, the morning temperature will drop to the single digit. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have at this hour. We'll be back later at 8 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.